Hey guys! What's up? Alpha Lion Simba here, and I'm back on Movie Fans channel. Once again, we're gonna do a team up with Movie Fan, yours truly, and Bonnie from Joy Unicycle.
Hi everybody, Movie Fan here.
Hey, movie fan, Alpha Lion Simba.
And we're gonna talk about the legendary animator, Don Bluth. We're gonna talk about his movies and what our thoughts on each one were.
I'm really looking forward to this one because we've been talking about this for a long time.
Oh, Don Bluth, I've been waiting for this one. This is a great one.
Now, a lot of people would remember that back in the day when he was really getting started, he worked for Disney. He was one of the animators who worked on movies such as Pete's Dragon, The Rescuers, Robin Hood, The Aristocats, The Jungle Book. He even helped with Sleeping Beauty, although he was never given any credit for it. But believe it or not, Don Bluth didn't just do movies back in the day. He also did video games, two in particular. First off is the legendary game Dragon Slayer, which, believe it or not, a lot of people have said saved the arcades because of its new design idea. Because this game took a very different approach from, your traditional games. For any of you who's ever played Atari or anything like that, or even the original Nintendo games, you know what I'm talking about. For this game, it took a very different approach, especially for the arcades. Because instead of just doing the usual thing, what would happen is you would watch the game go on. It would be like watching a movie. And at a certain time, you would push a button to make something happen. And if you got the right button, you would move on to an area where our main character would escape or defeat a creature. Or if you got the wrong button at the wrong time, he would die. It was a very new concept, way ahead of its time. And believe it or not, this paved the way for video games that told stories. He also went to make another game called Space Ace, but it does not have the legendary status that Dragon Slayer does. So it's pretty interesting to know that here we get an animator who goes from animation to actually making animation sequences for video games. It's pretty incredible, to say the least.
Around the 80s, that's when he started to make his own animated movies, starting with The Secret of Nim. I can describe The Secret of Nim with just one word. Phenomenal. I mean, what's not to like about this movie? First up, the animation. Simply put, it is phenomenal. The backgrounds were amazing, from the lair of the great owl to the rose bush. Even the inside of Mrs. Brisby's house looked all great to look at. As for the character animation, they all reflect the personalities of the characters really well, such as the timid yet determined Mrs. Brisby or the cunning looks of Jenner. As for the characters, Mrs. Brisby herself was a very likable protagonist in her need not to give up. Jeremy the Crow was very funny, providing us with some very witty one-liners, and, well, who better to play him than Dom DeLuise? Then there's Jenner. Jenner was a great villain. He was cunning, he was calculated, he was really tough. I mean, if you see the sword fight between him and Justin in the climax, you know he is not a rat to be trifled with. Now, as for the script, this movie's script was very well written. It treated its audience with great maturity and respect, really shows the struggles of being a mouse or rat coexisting with humans, especially one with super intelligence, and it makes very clear on the stakes for both Mrs. Brisby's children and the rats. Honestly, I'd say go see Secret of Nim, but let's face it, you already have.
That's true, Alpha. We already have. I know I was one of them back in the day. I used to watch this movie religiously back then. And with all honesty, I'm surprised my folks would let me watch it because this movie was actually pretty violent. Now, I'm not saying the movie was like rated R or anything, but there are moments where you see blood. Like, for instance, when Jenner gets killed, and of course, you see Mrs. Brisby cut her arm and blood coming off of that. And not to mention, there are some pretty big moments that can be downright scary for a little kid. And that's one of the things that made this movie work so well, is because it was a dark movie. It wasn't like a happy, cheery Disney film. It was dark. It was a little twisted. It was demented. It was, well, It was showing that everything is not happy-go-lucky in the world. That's what made it work so well. They tried to be realistic, well, more or less, because obviously there are no intelligent rats and mice don't wear capes and stuff like that. But still, it worked. It's truly a great film, definitely worth watching. In fact, it's been said that this movie actually rivaled Disney. It's no joke. It was good enough to rival Disney. So that says a lot for how legendary this film really is. Now, I could say about how awesome it is and all that, but Alpha said it all, so there's really nothing more I can add to it. Now, if there was any complaints about the movie, besides the violence, of course, just because, it would have to be the story about the rats of Nim themselves. Now, it's very well told. However, it is a little bit rushed. What makes me say that? Well, back in junior high, I read that part of the story. For some reason, our teacher decided to read that part of the story alone about the rats of Nim, and not the whole story itself. I don't know, maybe he was just trying to teach us that reading is very important. Anyway, we read that part of the story, and there was a lot more to it than just what you see in the film. Now, granted, they get to the central core that by giving them those injections, they become intelligent, but they don't bring in the fact that they were teaching them how to read and all that, which is one of the things that enabled them to escape in the first place. By teaching them to learn and to read, that's how they were able to break out. But even though it's a little rushed, it does get to the point. I wish they could have done a little bit more with it, but it works, so I can't complain too much. All in all, great film. If you haven't seen it, which I doubt, you definitely need to look that one up. And I think we can all agree with that, right?
Secret of Nim. Secret of Nim is incredible. Oh my gosh. Originally, I had never heard of this movie until the Nostalgia Critic kept bringing it up over and over as one of the most underrated classics ever. And he's right. And not just him, almost every critic that I know talks about Secret of Nim and how it's a classic of its own, and how many risks it took with it. I would say one of the coolest things about this is the atmosphere. You feel it all around, whether looking at the animation, feeling the characters, and looking at the environments that they are in. You feel the weight of it, the size of it, the scope, the dread, and everything that Mrs. Brisby is going through. And it's just phenomenal. Lately, I've been thinking, well, in terms of the characters, Mrs. Brisby is actually one of the coolest and most unique characters that I've seen in a children's animated movie. I mean, not just because she's a widow, but because she does everything in her power to help her family survive while also maintaining her personality. And what's her personality? She's scared, but she's determined too, to make sure that her family stays alive. With all the feminist power movies that are coming out a lot of the times or trying to shoehorn that message in, this movie does it perfectly. It shows that no matter what size, gender, or what character arc you have, it all depends on you and what you want and how far you're willing to go for it. That's what I got out of Secret of Nim, watching Mrs. Brisby and how far she went. Another thing I love about this movie is that I could not even predict the plot. I did everything in my power to avoid spoilers from this movie. So when I went into it blind. And it was really, really great. It was phenomenal. And now I'm one of those people who's going to recommend it to anybody. So yeah, I have to give this movie a 6 out of 5. Being unable to predict the plot gives it a score up.
That's very true, Bonnie. And with all honesty, that is a very rare quality in movies. Most of the time, you know what's going to happen, because let's get real, movies are way too predictable, especially now. But for this one, it really is very unpredictable. You don't really know what's going to happen next or what's going on until it happens. And if I may interject, I totally agree about Mrs. Brisby. She does give that impression. But I think she also demonstrates what true heroism is. And that's the fact that even though she is terrified to try to drug Dragon the cat, or terrified to go see the rats, or go see the great owl, she goes. That's what true bravery is. And it's definitely what true heroism is. It's the fact that you're scared to do this, but yet you do it because you know you must. That's something that everyone can learn from, and I think many of us can stand behind all the way.
Don's next movie was An American Tail. And you know what? It's actually pretty good. The animation was amazing because we really shouldn't expect any less from Don. And it had a good cast of characters. Fievel was a very likable protagonist, and Dom DeLuise was hilarious as Tiger the Cat. And as for Warren T. Rat, the villain, he has the perfect mix of being funny and evil. And for the first time in this case, Don Bluth's movie was a musical, and most of the songs in it were actually really catchy, especially the one that everyone knows.
But there are no cats in America, and the streets are paved with cheese.
The story was pretty good, with its interaction with its characters, some underlying political themes, but I must admit, it does have some pacing issues. Like, I know I'm probably the only one who calls this out, but there are times where Fievel is looking for his family, and they're directly underneath him, and he doesn't even look. Sometimes it just feels like it's just done to extend the movie's runtime. But on the whole, this is still a really good movie. In my book, I'd give An American Tail probably an 8 out of 10 and a silver medal. So yeah, this is a good film. I'd say check it out.
Well, with American Tail, I'm going to confess that I've seen bits and pieces of it, but the bits and pieces I've seen of it are very much phenomenal. My goodness. I like how it touches base on what early immigration was like and how they dealt with it. Except instead of humans dealing with it, it's mice dealing with it, which kind of makes the atmosphere of coming to this new land even more terrifying. I would say that the main downside is, why doesn't the family or Fievel look the other direction? They pass each other without knowing, and you just want to scream, look the other direction! But it makes you want to scream at Don Bluth for tugging at your heartstrings until the very end, where you're like, just get together, please! But in many ways, that helps with a good story, especially since the characters are great. They're likable, they're wonderful, and Fievel's actually really good. The kid playing Fievel, this was his first time, and he really does come through as a legit character, and I like that in this movie. I have to give it a 5 out of 5.
American Tail was a great film. I'll admit, it took me a while to finally get to see it because, unfortunately, the sequel was more legendary than the first film itself. But Don Bluth didn't do that, so we won't be talking about that. Anyway, back on track. I agree. The animation was superb. And the story was good too. But I think it was really the animation itself that really stood out on its own. Especially when you get to the one scene which has been labeled nightmare fuel for kids. And that would be the giant mouse of Minsk. If you don't know what we're talking about, that would be this right here. Now, the rest of the animation is great in the movie by itself, but there's something about the giant mouse of Minsk which looks very different from the rest of the characters and the background and everything else. I don't know what it is. Some people might think that maybe it was CGI. I can assure you it wasn't. But there is a kind of a weird pre-CGI quality about it. Obviously, it's drawn to make it look scary, but at the same time, it's like they used a very different technique. A technique that I still cannot put my finger on. And I will agree, Bonnie, the whole fact that why doesn't Fievel or his family just turn around and see each other is beyond me. I never could figure that out either. There is one thing that I do have to complain about a little, and that's the fact that there's no real explanation as to how Tiger ends up befriending the family. I mean, we got the whole story as to how he becomes friends with Fievel, especially since they explain that he's a vegetarian. But There's no explanation as to how he met Feifel's family, the Mousekewitz. Because, all of a sudden it's like the giant mouse tank is chased him into the water, and all of a sudden the Mousekewitz are riding on Tiger's back. No explanation at all. Now, granted, maybe he could have said he was a vegetarian like he did the Feifel. I mean, maybe that's what they did, but it would have been nice to know rather than just, boom, they're pals. But all in all, it was a good movie. Definitely worth watching. Although it's not as classic as its sequel is, because the sequel really outshined it. There's no denying it. But it does stand well on its own. If you're not scared of the giant mouse of Minsk, I think you would like this one.
After the successes of The Secret of Nim and An American Tail, Don Bluth released his third movie, The Land Before Time. Now, before I get into my opinion on the movie, let me share with you a fun fact about it. This movie, in its early stages, was meant to be dialogue-free, kind of like the Rite of Spring segment in Fantasia, but the studio executives felt that in order for the movie to succeed, the dinosaurs had to speak. But boy, did they ever make a success with this movie. This is hands down my favorite Don Bluth film. And it's not just because I'm a sucker for dinosaurs. There's a lot of really good things about this movie. First up, again, the animation. This is easily one of Don's best looking animated films. The backgrounds look great as they amplify the intensity of the story. And as for the designs of the dinosaurs, they managed to get every little detail right. And as for the characters, well, Littlefoot himself was a very likable protagonist and showed great leadership. And Spike, I find to be a very enjoyable character and really highlights how a character can be likable even if he can't speak. Petrie was also really funny, and Ducky was really cute. I mean, something about Judith Barcy's delivery just really sucks me into the character. I'll admit, if there was one of the main characters I didn't particularly care for, it would probably have to be Sarah, because she was a brat, which is kind of why I liked her better in the sequels, where she was a grumpy kid, but still nice overall. But here, she was a brat. As for the script, this was a fantastic script. It certainly did not talk down to its audience. And I liked how there wasn't any huge cartoony villain. Okay, one can argue that Sharptooth was the villain, but then again, he's just a natural predator doing what predators do, as a stark contrast to someone like, say, Warren T. Rat. And you know how Don always used to say that kids can handle anything as long as you attach a happy ending? Well, it really shows here, because there are a lot of dark moments in this movie, like when Littlefoot's mom fights Sharptooth, or heck, even the scene where Littlefoot has to save Petrie, Ducky, and Spike from a tar pit. These really keep you on the edge of your seat. And the climax really keeps you on the edge of your seat, too. Now, if I did have to pick one problem with the script, it would have to be the scene where the spirit of Littlefoot's mother appears to him in the clouds. Not to say that that's not necessarily a bad idea. I mean, put pen to paper. It's a very good idea, but I think it was too rushed and they put it in the wrong place because they put it right after Littlefoot and his friends defeat Sharptooth. I think that they should have put that scene before the climax, not after. But honestly, that's just a nitpick. The Land Before Time is, without a doubt, a fantastic movie. My score for The Land Before Time is a 9.5 out of 10 and a gold medal. So, I say, find this movie on DVD, Blu-ray, iTunes, or Amazon Prime and see it for yourself.
Ah, yes, The Land Before Time. There is no doubt this movie has achieved legendary status. It is by far the most famous movie that he ever made. Now, I could say about the animation and all that, but Al covered that one perfectly. And there's really nothing more to say about that. But there is one thing that most people tend to overlook about this movie, and that's the music. The music really grips you. Like, for instance, when the big earth shake happens, that music just captures your imagination, and it gives you that feeling of terror and dread. It just screams, they're in trouble, big time. Just listen to this for a minute. And there is no doubt the animation and the music work perfectly together. They are literally in sync. Which reminds me, there's also one other thing about this movie that nobody ever talks about. And that's the fact that Sharptooth's roar has been used in thousands of other movies and TV shows. In fact, this roar was actually used for the legendary Dragon Zord in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Take a look. And that's just scratching the surface. Believe me, if I tried to post every time this roar was used, we would be using up our time, so I can't do it. I've always loved this movie. It's always been one of my go-to movies that I just had to watch back in the day. I watched this so much as a kid that I know it like the back of my hand. And it's been said that this actually revived the dinosaur craze, because shortly after this movie came out, thousands of other dinosaur movies, TV shows, the whole 9 yards, they were all coming out. And of course, if you haven't seen the movie, you really need to watch it. It is a true blue classic. Definitely worth seeing.
Land Before Time. Oh, what a classic. And for good reason. When I first watched it, I have to say one of the things that I first noticed was how cute each of the characters were, but not in a way that was pandering. That was just great. They have their own personalities, they're extremely likable, and I dare anybody to argue this with me, but I think Ducky was the cutest character of the entire group. Please debate me. Much like Secret of Nim, but in its own way, the animation and environment of the characters are massive. When you're next to one of the adult long necks, you feel the giganticness of them as well as see it. And you're mostly looking at it from Littlefoot's perspective. And he's the smaller of the long necks. Also, the environment, the background animation just looks great. Much like Secret of Nim, you also feel the danger, the excitement, and the beauty when they get to the Great Valley. And I'm gonna have to say this. Another thing that I like about it is that before Ice Age, this was one of the first films that combined different kinds of characters together as a group and as a team. So much so that spin-off sequels kept being made off of it, trying to explore each of their personalities. Or should I say try, in the loosest sense of the word. I also like the theme in here. It's dealing with loss, whether it's through denial or grief or just perseverance, and working through it with the new friends that you're surrounded with. And I don't really see kids' films doing that so much nowadays. I have to say, this is another thing I like about Don Bluth. He took risks with his movies, and Land Before Time was definitely proof of that. He took risks with these characters and put them through realistic issues. I would have to say that I'd give this a 5 out of 5, because you know what, this is really good. All right, now, so let's talk about the sequels.
No,
not the sequels.
Guys,
Bonnie,
I'm
no,
just
too much.
kidding.
No,
I'm just kidding. Don Bluth had nothing to do with these sequels, but he did have to do with the next movie.
Then, in 1989, Don Bluth released his fourth movie, All Dogs Go to Heaven. I really liked this one as a kid, and as an adult, while I don't like it as much as I did when I was a kid, I still do like it. I mean, the animation, as always, was great. In fact, I actually have to say that this is another one of the best-looking Don Bluth films, because each dog is given its own color palette and its own unique design, whether it be the standard German Shepherd colors for Charlie, or the purple and pink for Annabelle, the Whippet Angel. And It had a pretty good cast, too. Charlie is voiced by the late Burt Reynolds. He was really good for the part. Now, as for the character, he is kind of a douche at the start of the movie, but I like how he does get better as the movie progresses. Itchy is voiced by Don Bluth veteran himself, Dom DeLuise, and he provides a few good laughs here and there. Anne-Marie was a very sweet character, and the second Don Bluth character to be voiced by Judith Barcy. May she rest in peace. Carface was a really good villain, and who better to voice him than Vic Tayback? But undeniably, the movie does have some flaws, like there are some pacing issues, with some scenes going too fast and some scenes going too slow. There are a few times when there are jump cuts cut in between. It's pretty obvious that the studio heads were forcing Don to edit a lot of it. But on the whole, the story was still pretty likable, and of course, the ending is a very nice, heartwarming ending. Overall, I give All Dogs Go to Heaven a 7 out of 10 and a silver medal.
All Dogs Go to Heaven, another Don Bluth classic. I've always loved this movie as well. I know, I've said that quite a few times so far, but, I call it like I see it, or how I feel it. And I've always loved this movie. And the funny thing is, I didn't understand this as a kid back then, but I do now, that Charlie was, well, yeah, sure, he was what Alpha just said, but he was more than that. He was, well, a gangster. I'm not kidding. He was a gangster, because in the song, You Can't Keep a Good Dog Down, he says that he'll be running rackets when he's old. Well, that is a straight up mafia thing. In fact, the term racketeer was one of the old terms for gangsters. We don't use that term anymore, but that's pretty much what it was. And, I cannot help but say this. Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise. When you get those two together, it's like Abbott and Costello. I don't know what it is, but they just worked so well together. In fact, they made quite a few movies together. But not only does it have the great team-up of Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise, it also has some very impressive animation. I've always been a sucker for that. And again, this movie does take some pretty big chances. Like, for instance, when Charlie is having that nightmare. Here we have this nightmare involving this horrific-looking demon. It was nightmare fuel for kids. There's no doubt about it. It would definitely make you stay awake at night. In fact, when he dies, saving Anna Marie, he comes back to say goodbye to her, and, well, he comes back in a red sun kind of image, like he just came back from hell. And, of course, the devil is right there calling for him. But because he saved Anna Marie, he goes to heaven. And funny thing, there is one moment that is always greatly overlooked. And that's the fact that Burt Reynolds is actually singing in this movie. Now, granted, he sang one small song in the movie Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, but, that was just a small part. Really, it was Dolly and them that were the real singers there. But in this one, he really is actually singing. If you hear the song, Let Me Be Surprised.
I need Brazil, the throb, the thrill. I've never been there, but someday I will. Adventure and danger, love from a stranger. Let me be surprised.
He's doing really good. A lot better than you think he would, because, he's legendary as an actor, but a singer, no. He's definitely not known for that at all. I mean, granted, he wasn't meant to be, but still, I'm impressed. It's funny how nobody ever acknowledges that. The movie has taken some flack over the years, but I still say it's a good movie that everyone should see. So, Bonnie, what's your take on this movie?
Well, the first thing I have to say is, for kids! You got a dog that is killed while he's drunk. You've got dogs that are gambling, murderers, kidnappers. Yeah, and all combined somehow into a kid's film. But that is part of what makes this movie cool. I think in some ways it would have been very easy to make the dog characters that we see human because they have the humanistic personalities, obviously, but somehow they decided to make them animals, which kind of made it more intriguing. Though I still have to say I find it a little creepy that one of the dogs is holding a girl hostage. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they kept the characters animals instead of human, because that would have looked creepy. I also like how the main character is selfish, eventually learns to have an open heart after literally cheating death, and how the little girl kind of helps him regain salvation. I'd say that the only downside is the title. Not that there's anything wrong with the title, I like it, but do you ever realize that Charlie is almost in danger of going to hell for cheating death? All dogs go to heaven? And plus, even the heavenly dog is having trouble finding anything good that he did, even though she described dogs being automatically good, and the dogs are not automatically good. Isn't it a little check your facts? But aside from that, the movie's great, and definitely had a wonderful way of challenging kids and adults, and had fun with it. So, on that, I have to rate this movie 5 out of 5. Yeah, Alpha, could we take a moment of silence for Judith Barcy?
And then the 90s rolled around for Don. Oh dear fudge. The 90s was not kind to Mr. Bluth. In fact, I think the nostalgia critic said it best. The good stuff ended with All Dogs Go to Heaven, and the bad stuff began with Rock-A-Doodle. And speaking of which, that's what we start with. Rock-A-Doodle. This movie was a mother-clucking mess, if you'll pardon the pun. And really, the animation is one of the very few good things at it. The backgrounds are painted really nice, and some of the character designs were pretty cool, especially the ones with the owls. But in this case, the good does not outweigh the bad. Now, the character cast is just an absolute train wreck. I mean, Chanticleer is supposed to be the main character, but we barely see him. And I think he takes about much less screen time than Edmund does. And Edmund, I don't even think is supposed to be the main character. Speaking of that, ugh, I can't stand this kid. I mean, I can tell the actor's trying to be cute, kind of like Judith Barcy was, but it just ended up annoying. I mean, you want to know what made Judith Barcy so great as Anne-Marie in All Dogs and Ducky and Land Before Time? It wasn't that she had a cute, precious little kid voice, but that her delivery and her talents at acting made her characters charming and enjoyable to watch. Here, this kid's all just like, oh, are they so cute? Just notice me. But then there's Patu, the dog, voiced by Phil Harris in his final role. And, well, he's not interesting, complete with his running gag of not being able to tie his shoes, which isn't even remotely funny. Speaking of which, Snipes the Bird, voiced by Eddie Deason, yes, Mandark Eddie Deason, he's not funny and was so annoying. Even though I like Mandark in Dexter's Laboratory, I have never liked the sound of Eddie Deason's voice. I just can't stand that nasally voice. But if there is one good character in here, it would have to be the Grand Duke of Owls. The Grand Duke of Owls was a pretty effective bad guy, and who better to voice him than Christopher Plummer? May he rest in peace. Now, as for the songs, I don't remember a single one. But then there's the script, and I must reiterate, what a mother-clucking mess. Because absolutely nothing in this movie makes any sense, because apparently Chanticleer does have the power to bring back the sun, but then there was a time where it came up when he didn't crow. They don't explain it. I have no clue what's going on here. Oh, and I can see that Don Bluth was pulling a Who Framed Roger Rabbit by mixing in live-action people with animated characters. Well, he should have scrapped that idea since the live-action bits are only at the beginning and the end. But yeah, this movie sucked. My grade for Rock-A-Doodle is a 2 out of 10 and a trash can.
Boo, you stink!
Just don't bother watching it.
Rock-A-Doodle. Oh boy, oh boy. What a cool idea that got poorly executed is the first thing I gotta say about it. I like this idea. I really do. I like this idea of a kid going into the animated bedtime story world to help the characters find Chanticleer. But somehow that got poorly botched. Well, I guess I'll start with the great moments. I think that Chanticleer could have been an interesting character. I think that this movie was banking on the fact that the parents might have seen the Chanticleer play, while the kids, maybe they'll catch up on it later, but I don't know. Chanticleer on his own could be interesting, but he's sidelined for the boy character, Edmund. False advertising much? If you found a way to balance the two in the movie, then I would have liked to see more of Chanticleer. And also, I think Glenn Campbell, who voices Chanticleer, is really, really good. And I also like how the music has kind of a mock Elvis theme. And it actually kind of works. I find it entertaining to see the rooster impersonate Elvis in his own way. I also have to say that naming the main character Edmund, I think is kind of clever. It's a nod to the original playwright. But, of course, I think that the best part, easily, is the Grand Duke of Owls. Even if he's kind of an embarrassment, he's just so much fun. And you could tell that Christopher Plummer was relishing every moment as this character, even over some of the cheesiest lines in the movie, and made every moment in there enjoyable. But I still have to wonder why he thought that this movie was better than Sound of Music.
What? Christopher Plummer thought that this was better than The Sound of Music?
Okay, I only got one answer for that. And it's right here.
Oh well, now let's get to the problems. Oh boy. First thing is the constant narration. Oh boy. Now, originally this movie was not meant to have Phil Harris narrating every single moment, but because test audiences had no idea what they were watching, they shoehorned it in at the last minute. I think it works in the beginning, when the mom is reading the story to Edmund, but when it went all throughout the entire film, it just became too much and too annoying. If test audiences did not understand what was going on, then maybe it needed a little bit of a rewrite. And not just shoehorned narration, because there is such a thing in movies as show, don't tell, whereas in a book you have to tell when you're unable to show. There's a difference. Also, let me just say that I don't think it's entirely fair to compare the kid who plays Edmund to Judith Barcy, because in Judith Barcy's defense, she had been acting since she was 3 years old, and that was long before Land Before Time. So I'm going to compare this kid to the one who played Feifel, as that was also his first role. Here's what they did differently. The kid playing Feifel actually had emotion. You could identify with the character, and the way he was written, you felt every moment with this character. With Edmund, the way he was written, he was cutesy for the sake of pandering to cutesiness. It's the opposite of what I shared about Land Before Time, about characters being cute for a reason. They were overselling on the cuteness for him. If they'd written his dialogue or story better, then the kid playing Edmund could have had a better shot, but also his acting wasn't that great. I don't know if he really could have saved it, but I really blame the writers for this one, because you could have a cute character, but you should write them with purpose and not just make them the pandering one. But if there is one character I have a gripe with, it's Snipes. Snipes is obnoxious. I hate this character. This is the one character that you want to yell shut up at, just as much as the narrator. Also, the villain songs are embarrassing. They're fun, they can be funny, but they're mostly an embarrassment. Such as We Hate the Sun, No Batteries, and the Picnic song. They last for seconds, and they're literally just singing about anything. And plus, when is the next time you're going to hear a villain's song include the lyrics twiddly-dee? It's hilarious, but it's still embarrassing. Again, Christopher Plummer, was Sound of Music really that bad compared to Rock-A-Doodle? I don't know if this is originally what Don Bluth wanted, but I kind of get the feeling that he wanted to do more. Heck, he almost went dark with this movie. There's literally a deleted scene of the Grand Duke of Owls cooking a skunk pie. But that was deleted because, well, they wanted to avoid the PG rating. So I'm guessing that Don Bluth, got notes on how to do this film, and the corporate businesses made sure that the rewriting was super family-friendly, but in the wrong ways where it talked down to their audience. And that's usually not like Don Bluth. I would say that I give this movie a 2 out of 5 because I think it's a good concept that got horribly botched and horribly executed, and Don Bluth really should have given this a rewrite.
Rock-A-Doodle. Unfortunately, I had the displeasure of watching this movie. I saw the commercials years ago, and I thought it was going to be a story about a rooster who wants to be a singer. And plus, in the commercials, they kept showing images of him singing and all that. So I was thinking that's what it was going to be. Lo and behold, it was a real disappointment. And as Alpha already said, it is a big, fat lie. It is definitely nothing like that at all. Now, I could say the usual stories about how bad this is, but let's get real. Alpha and Bonnie already said it all, so there's really nothing I can add to how bad this is, except for a few small things. Like 1, Patu. And yes, I am talking about the shoes issue. And no, it's not what you think. We already covered the running gag. It's stupid, there's no doubt about that. But here's another add-on to that gag. Why does he wear the shoes? Because he has bunions. That's what he said. Do you know what the biggest cause of bunions is? Shoes. So it kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it? That's pretty much all the bad things I can do. Because, well, let's get real, it's all been said. However, there are a few good things. Case in point, definitely the Grand Duke of Owls. I know, it's been said already that Christopher Plummer did a fine job in playing him. And it's true. He did a superb job playing him. He acts like this big, dignified gentleman. And then he acts like a complete jerk at the same time. He's very good at that. And it's one of the things I like about him. Like when he's talking to Edmund on the phone, it goes just like this.
Hello, Kitty? It's the Duke. I have some rather bad news, I'm afraid. When the batteries expire, so will your friends. Toodaloo, cheerio. Bye.
I love that. Because, I just love that whole gag. Obviously, Christopher Plummer was having a lot of fun with this character because, I cannot picture anybody going to that kind of lengths for a character like this unless they were not trying to have fun with it. And yes, I know the songs are bad, but I cannot help but chuckle every time I hear No Batteries. I mean, how can you not chuckle a little when you hear this?
Twiddly-dee, twiddly-dee. They're running out.
They're running out.
They're running out of batteries.
Batteries.
No batteries.
I'm sorry. I cannot help it. It's actually funny to me. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's funny. Because, I'm sorry. I do get a kick out of that. It's so terrible that it makes me laugh. But I can't help it. And, one other character that is widely overlooked is the Grand Duke's nephew, Hunch, who is actually voiced by legendary comedian and actor Charles Nelson Riley. Charles Nelson Riley, he's hilarious. I love the way he talks to the Grand Duke because he always comes in saying, Uncle Dookie, every time. And he's got this Swiss Army knife and he doesn't know how to work it except during the right moments. It's moments like that that make him a good comedy relief character. But all that aside, the sad thing is, this could have really been something. If they had stuck with what I was thinking, that it was going to be a story about a rooster who's just trying to make it big in the music industry, that could have worked. But, they decided to take this route. And what's worse is they had a good cast. I'm not kidding. They actually had a good cast. As we all know, Glenn Campbell was the voice of Chanticleer. As we all know, he was a legendary country singer. But a lot of people don't know that he actually did make a couple films, this being one of them. But he also starred with John Wayne in his greatest movie, True Grit. And he was actually really good in that. And on top of that, he made quite a few appearances on Dean Martin's variety show. In fact, there was one skit where he was pretending to be Elvis, and it was great. It was phenomenal. He even sounded a lot like him. And, considering that Chanticleer's character seems to be a rooster version of Elvis, he was the perfect choice to do that. And here's an interesting fact for you. Glenn Campbell and Elvis were good friends. In fact, I think he took this role just as a shout out to his good buddy there. And of course, Christopher Plummer, like we've all pretty much said, he was pretty much the saving grace in this movie. Not enough to save the movie, there's no doubt about that. But, his character profile was great. It was pretty much the best part in this whole picture. And Charles Nelson Riley, great comedy relief character. I love it. And Phil Harris, he did so many great films like Disney's The Jungle Book, Robin Hood, The Aristocats, and I've seen him in action on Dean Martin's variety show and the old Jack Benny radio dramas. He was one of the greatest, and they could have done so much more with him other than make him into a narrator and the running gag of, I can't tie my shoes and they hinder me at every turn. And on top of that, the animation is great. There's some serious attention to detail in the opening parts. Like, for instance, when Edmund pokes the Grand Duke of Al's monocle, you can actually see the glass break under his finger. That's some great attention to detail. But then they blow it when Edmund enters into Chanticleer's world as, well, himself. Just watching it speaks for itself, doesn't it? I mean, you could tell he just really doesn't belong there. Could they make that work? I don't know. Quite frankly, I think it would have been better off if they just left that whole thing out. Just let it be like it was a dream or something, rather than the cliche story of, oh, it was just a dream. Or was it? Bottom line, don't watch this movie. It is not worth the effort at all. It is horrible. It is gut-wrenchingly horrible. And that is all I gotta say about this.
Then, after the release and failure of Rock-A-Doodle, Don Bluth released his sixth animated film, Thumbelina. Did this one fare any better than the previous? No. Thumbelina, like Rock-A-Doodle, tanked at the box office, making back only half of its original budget, and was panned by critics. But before I go into my thoughts on the movie, I gotta share another bit of trivia with you. During the test screenings of this movie, they put in, and no, I am not making this up, the Walt Disney Pictures animation logo right before it started. Yep, they did that to make the test audience think they were watching a Disney movie. But they didn't do that once they hit the actual theater and instead switched it out with an Animaniacs short called I'm Mad. Now, as for the movie itself, again I start with the animation. The backgrounds are freaking gorgeous. Whether it be a forest or even a pond, even somewhere underground, the backgrounds are beautiful. As for the character animation, I can tell they're kind of trying to copy off Disney in some results, but some of them actually do look pretty good. Now, as for our main cast of characters, first up I gotta say the voice acting's really good. Like, Thumbelina herself is voiced by Jodie Benson, aka Ariel from The Little Mermaid, and the mole is voiced by the late John Hurt. The beetle is voiced by Gilbert Gottfried. And of course, the king and queen of the fairies, they have an all-star voices themselves. The queen is voiced by the late June Foray, and the king is voiced by Kenneth Mars, who is best known as King Triton from The Little Mermaid and Grandpa Longneck in the Land Before Time sequels. But enough with the cast, let's get on with our characters. Now, Thumbelina herself, she's just plain non-interesting, and she gives up way too easily. yeah, not even Jodie Benson's singing could save this character. Cornelius, her love interest, they have potential to be a good couple, but they don't really get enough screen time, and so their romance isn't really all that believable. But then there's Jacquimo, the bird. Oh my gosh, I hate this character. Because for one, he does nothing to further the plot or help Thumbelina at all. I mean, he gives all this follow your heart advice when he could just, oh, I don't know, give Thumbelina a lift home. I mean, seriously, every time that Jacquimo is on screen, I just want to... Yeah, that character really irritates me. But I did make mention of Gilbert Gottfried voicing the Beetle, and honestly, it's hard for me not to enjoy any moment that Beetle's on screen, because it's Gilbert Gottfried. In my opinion, that guy can just read the phone book, and it would still be hilarious. Now, as for the songs, this is a weak point in the movie. I mean, I'll admit, Let Me Be Your Wings is a very beautiful love song, even if it is a ripoff of A Whole New World. As for the rest of them, for the most part, not the worst, but not that memorable. Well, actually, I take that back, because the opening song that they use to describe our titular heroine, ugh, ear poison. Yeah, even though the Razzie Awards would beg to differ, I say that is the worst song in the movie. Speaking of which, another one of the songs in the movie, Marry the Mole, won the 1994 Razzie Award for Worst Original Song, even though I didn't mind that too much. Now, as for the story, I think they were trying a little too hard to copy off of Disney. And even though I liked Gilbert Gottfried as the Beetle and John Hurt as the Mole, I don't know why they needed a big bad villain, or heck, even 5 villains for this script. I mean, why not just do what The Land Before Time did? Because that was just more of a protagonist versus nature story. So why not have this be a protagonist versus nature story? But if there is a plus side with this story, is that the comedy genuinely does work. And admittedly, I did like the ending. So while I did enjoy Thumbelina as a kid, I'll admit it's not as good as I remember. In fact, as an adult, I'll have to give it a 5 out of 10 and a bronze medal.
Thumbelina. Oh boy. You know, I cannot really review this one because I've never really seen it. And with good reason. Back in the day, it did not interest me because, it seemed more like a movie for little girls. And for the obvious reasons, I wasn't interested. Some years later, it appeared on Nickelodeon or something like that, and I figured I'd give it a chance. And as soon as I turned to it, I ended up changing the channel so fast I almost broke my remote control doing it. Why? Well, when I turned to it, it was halfway through the movie. And when I started at this scene right here.
Here comes the bride is a lovely little ditty, but marrying for love is a foolish thing to do. 'Cause love won't pay the mortgage or put porridge in your bowl. Dearie, marry the mole. True, it's a fact that he's not exactly witty. He's blinder than a bat, but at least his eyes are blue. His breath may be alarming, but he's charming for a troll. Dearie, marry the mole.
Enough said. And it's because of that scene alone, I was literally turned off of the movie immediately. And because of that, I really can't review this. But I can say one thing that needs to be said. In this god-awful song, it's obvious that Thumbelina does not want to marry the mole. She's obviously not for it, right? So why is she dancing in this song? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, if she's against it, shouldn't she be just kind of like standing there kind of thinking it over, or have at least have a look on her face like, I don't know, rather than actually dancing to this song. And I've said all I can say about this, so I'm going to pass it on to Bonnie.
Thumbelina. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to my guilty pleasure of the list. I grew up with this movie, and I still like it as an adult, but I do see flaws in it, and I will say that. I do see the flaws in it. Some of them I don't agree with, but most of them I pretty much do. But let's get into why I like it firsthand. I think the animation's beautiful, the score and the music is gorgeous. And I love the main character's songs, such as Soon and Let Me Be Your Wings. Those are some of my favorite songs from them, and let's be honest, Jodi Benson could almost any song sound tolerable or great, with a few exceptions, looking at you, Mighty Kong. And most people say that Prince Cornelius and Thumbelina have no chemistry. I see more chemistry from them than I do from the animated Disney Cinderella and her Prince Boring, where they don't even say a word. But yeah, since they did meet up, they could have had more time together. And to be fair, the plot mostly follows the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale of Thumbelina. So I can't really fault the plot for it, but I can fault a few things that they've added in there. Well, one of them is that this came out 5 years after The Little Mermaid, and you could definitely see the handprints on this movie. From having the original voice actress in there, as well as the voice actor for King Triton in there, and it's the same author, and one of the obsessions with Jodi Benson's character is that she's got a great singing voice. They say that all throughout the movie, just like they do in The Little Mermaid. So, one of the downfalls of this movie is that it's trying to copycat Disney. And that's not usually a good thing, because when most of the films like Quest for Camelot copied Disney, they forgot what made it great, or what made the characters great. It wasn't the music, it was the writing. The music was great, but they had to develop their characters into how they wanted them to be, and make them memorable, and their quest for whatever they wanted to do, or how they wanted to live their life, relatable, identifiable. What's Thumbelina's goal when you think about it? Thumbelina's goal? Go home and get married. As soon as she's born, she wants to get married. That's a little weird when you think about it. Yeah, she wants to connect with somebody that's her size, but she outright wants to marry somebody within the first 5 minutes of the movie. And that wasn't the goal in the original story, even though that kind of was a driving force that kept going in the entire story. Everybody wants to marry her, and she just wants to move on, maybe go home, or just explore this garden that she's in, wherever she is. But here, her goal is go home and get married. Also, yeah, you guys said it. Half the songs in this movie are skippable at best or annoying at worst, such as Thumbelina, On the Road, and of course, the infamous Marry the Mole. I'm not sure why that one won the Razzie, because mostly I just found that song boring and skippable as a kid. But I'm surprised that the Razzie didn't go to Your Beautiful Baby for the worst singer ever, next to Seth Rogen. And then, of course, there's the biggest problem in the entire movie. She befriends a bird, like maybe 20 minutes into the movie, and he just says, "You go find home, I'll go find the fairies." Why doesn't the bird just pick Thumbelina up and take her home and then say, "Wait here, I'll go get the fairy prince"? Yeah, that would not have been as true to the Andersen story as they would have liked, but it would have made a lot more sense. Plus, in the Andersen story, Thumbelina does not meet the bird until last third of the story, where she's nursing the bird back to health, and then he rescues her from an awful marriage to the mole. So that really doesn't make a lot of sense, like to have her befriend the bird and not ask for him to take her home, or at least take her to a tree so that she could see where she's going. There's even a scene where she's not only walking right under the house and has no idea, but asks a beetle to take her up to the tree so that she could see if she's going in the right direction. So the bird is being a jerk to her. It's just like, nope, just follow your heart, it'll lead you home. I get the follow your heart thing, but it's not a compass. And plus, you can fly. Take her on your back and show her where she needs to go. Or just say, go north. That's something! But aside from that, I still like this movie. I really still like this movie. If I was judging this, critically, I'd give it a 2.5 out of 5. But because it's my personal score and I still find this a guilty pleasure, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 because most of the music does it for me, and Jodie Benson's a great singer, and the animation's great, so I give it that.
Then, shortly thereafter, there came the god-awful, the terrible, the horrendous A Troll in Central Park. Of all the flops that Don had produced, this one was a big failure. Its budget was at $22 million, but it only grossed back a little more than $71,000. And it was received with scathingly bad reviews. And quite justifiably so, because this movie was utter trash. Again, I'm going to start with the animation, which is probably the one good thing about this movie. The backgrounds were nicely painted, and admittedly, the trolls in Troll World looked pretty awesome. But that's about the only saving grace I can give this movie. As for the characters, there's our main character, Stanley the Troll. He's voiced once again by Dom DeLuise. And while I did like Dom DeLuise in Secret of Nim, American Tail, and All Dogs Go to Heaven, he was obnoxious here. I mean, literally, any time that Stanley was talking, I instead just went begging for him to shut up. Now, as for Gnorga, our villain, let's see. What's her evil, dastardly plan? To turn Stanley into stone because she hates flowers. Wow. I mean, seriously, come on, Don. How did you go from a T-Rex that was way scarier than anything Jurassic Park had to offer, and a dog version of Al Capone, to this lame character? Now, as for Gus, he was annoying even more so than Stanley for reasons that I will explain once we get to the script. As for the songs, good gosh, the songs. The songs were forgettable at best and annoying at worst. Now, as for the script, I just gotta go. I mean, literally, 90% of this movie is just Stanley going on about how, oh, everything's happy. You can dream and it'll come true. Happy flowers dancing, dancing, dancing. I mean, seriously, this makes Barney the dinosaur and Care Bears look like freaking Watership Down. Ugh. I reiterate, Don, how did you go from a dark movie about a field mouse teaming up with scientifically advanced rats to save her children, and a group of orphan dinosaurs battling in the forces of nature, to freaking this? And of course, they just had to go with a happy ending. I mean, quick spoiler, but Stanley gets turned into stone by Gnorga. Which, honestly, my dislike for the character aside, they could have gone with that as the ending, you know, kind of make a bittersweet kind of ending, kind of like the snowman. But nope, it had to bring Stanley back to life with no explanation. Now, I made mention of Gus. Here's the part of the script that makes me aggravate him. Not only is he a brat, but he's in these moods because his dad has to miss out on time at the park because he has to go to work. Yup, we get that same workaholic parent trope we got in Hook and the remake of Shaggy Dog, etc. That drives me nuts, nuts, nuts! And it plays out in the same way it always does. That's the most I can rip this trash apart with. Overall, I give A Troll in Central Park a whopping 0 out of 10 and a trash can.
Oh, you stink!
Yeah, just stay away from this movie. If you want to watch a good Don Bluth movie, watch The Secret of Nim or The Land Before Time. Stay away from this.
And here we come to what is considered Don Bluth's weakest, and I say that nicely, animated film. But to be fair, I know that some people like this, and I know you like this movie, fan, and I talked about having a guilty pleasure in Thumbelina, so I'm gonna try and be fair about this movie as much as I can, but at the same time, I can pretty much see why it is considered Don Bluth's weakest animated movie. Well, I want to talk about the great stuff first, because I believe that almost every bad movie has got to have at least one great thing about it, and this movie does have more than one great thing. Like, I think this is Don Bluth's most beautifully animated movie. Maybe I'm just saying that because I'm a nature lover, but look at this. Bright green, bright colors, and some of them even have attention to detail. I love it. I mean, I genuinely like Stanley the Troll's character. I think he's cute, he's interesting, and he's voiced by Dom DeLuise. I mean, how can you not like him? Okay, maybe The Magic Voyage is an exception. And one thing I like about this is that it's Dom DeLuise's first time in a Don Bluth movie getting his own starring role. I mean, with the amount of times he's been in a Don Bluth movie, this is actually the first time that he's actually had a starring role, so congrats! And, well, you could tell that a lot of the adult actors in here, like Cloris Leachman, are giving it their best, whether comedically or straight-faced. I would say that the only ones who aren't quite giving it their best are the actors playing the parents. They just kind of sounded dull. Then again, the movie wasn't focused on them, so... But the characters that the movie did focus on, I think the actors really did give it their best, as much as they could. And plus, I like the song Absolutely Green. There's a reason Huey Two-More used it as his tribute to the late Dom DeLuise. It's gorgeous, it's sweet, and it even asks the question that the world could be better if we tried. But why don't we try anymore? I think this song really does put an upgrade on this movie, just slightly. Sorry, movie fan. I'm so sorry. It's time. Time to talk about why I at least find problems in this movie. I watch it too, and I like a few things about it, but these are why I think this is Don Bluth's weakest. The movie has a beginning and end for a plot, but the middle is literally nothing but flowers dancing and smiling for two kids, and there's only so long I could really take that. It pretty much is the equivalent of having your kids being babysat by television, and that's not what Don Bluth would usually do. When he wrote stories, he wrote it with a purpose. If there needed to be a time to pander, he would do that, but he panders throughout the entire middle act, and that's not like him. Also, the dialogue sounds even more talking down than Rock-A-Doodle. Like, there's literally moments where the characters will say,
I'm a bad troll, a very bad troll. Have a rotten day.
Maybe the rotten day I can let slide, but I'm a bad troll? How do you know you're bad? Like, this is just screaming to the audience, I'm bad, I'm bad. I think even 5-year-olds can guess that just by looking at the animation and the way the character talks. It's called trusting your audience. I guess there was a moral to this movie, which is dreaming, but it adds nothing to the what little of the middle plot there is. And I find Gus a spankable brat. And plus, there's a moment that really bothers me in here. He goes out of his way to save his sister and gets punished by being turned into a troll for acting like a troll. That's literally what they said. He wasn't acting like a troll in there. He was saving his sister. And plus, you gave him the power to turn things into stone. It just really bothered me in that moment. Also, one of the other things I do look into with a bad movie are the missed opportunities. And this movie really got stockpiled with missed opportunities, like exploring more of the culture of the trolls. If all trolls have thumb powers, where do they get them? How do they get them? And what kind of powers do they all have? Do they all turn things into stone? And if they do turn things into stone, how did Stanley get flower power? Why do flowers interest him? When did he first get this interest in flowers? Was he born born with this thumb? Or did something happen to make him get this thumb? Does this happen to all the other trolls? How does Stanley adapt to life being banished into Central Park over time? Because there's literally a scene where he's at first excited about New York, but then scared of it. How does he adapt to it? How does he eventually grow to like it? Also, why send him to Central Park of all the places? The King Troll talks about sending Stanley to a place of rock and steel where nothing grows. Okay, if you were sending him into a skyscraper in New York, that's one thing, but you literally sent him to Central Park, where flowers grow and more. If you really wanted to send him to a place where nothing grows, send him to the desert. Banish him to the Grand Canyon, where little to nothing grows. Or even for the fact that if he can make things grow, what's the difference? He's gonna grow things anyways, because he's got the thumb for it. Those are my missed opportunities, as well as my rambling over it. Much like Rock-A-Doodle, this really did not feel like something Don Bluth wanted to do. Well, part of it felt like something that Don Bluth kind of wanted to do, but got notes on it. I don't know how this worked, but it really felt like the end result was not entirely how he would have done it. For that, I'm going to give it a 1 out of 5. I give it a 1 because I think the score, the animation, and the main character are really good. Had they done more, the score could have been much higher and, well, would have been fun for both adults and children, instead of just a babysitter.
A Troll in Central Park. That is one of the big ones that we have been divided on for quite a while now. Yes, folks, it is true. I actually do like this movie. It's hard to believe, but I do. It all kind of came back to when I was a kid. You know, my folks and I, we watched this together quite a bit, and we had a lot of fun watching it. We actually liked it. I'm not going to lie, it is inferior to Don Bluth's earlier films like Secret of Nim and all that, but I don't think it was really as bad as a lot of people make it out to be, because I have seen way worse than this. This doesn't even come close to that. But, you know, I'm not going to lie, the plot is pretty weak, and, well, the middle, it does lack a lot, because, you know, there's a lot of this and that going on that doesn't add up. Like, one thing I never understood was, you know, that whole dream world thing where, you know, Gus is dreaming of that speedboat and all that, and all of a sudden we get this ship that looked like it came out of the Troll's world there. That never made any sense to me at all. And I'm not going to lie, the King of Trolls, he seems to be kind of a whatever character there. The only purpose he seems to have is just trying to give an excuse to not turn Stanley into stone. And, of course, you know, to have his leg constantly chewed on by Gnorga's dog all the time. It's funny the first time, but it does keep going, and it gets old really fast. But the fact is, I do like the movie, because, you know, it's got some good characters, like Stanley. He was a great character, despite what some people might think. He was likable, he was an interesting little troll to look at, and plus I loved his green thumb. I can't help it, I just liked it. And Gnorga, she was probably one of the best villains I've seen in a while, at least at that time. She's one of the few villains I know to actually describe herself perfectly. Case in point, her song, The Queen of Mean. And that is probably one of the best songs in the movie, next to Absolutely Green. Because, you know, I love how she describes herself as being this wicked queen. Case in point,
When I want, I will pillage and plunder. I'll bellow and thunder, make you shake and moan. Get in my way, and I'll get you forever, because I'll turn you into stone. I'm the queen of mean. I'm the meanest queen you've ever seen. You should have no doubt about my clout. I'm the queen of mean.
it describes her perfectly. There's no denying that. The music is great. I mean, I love the songs. There aren't too many of them, but they are good. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, I did think it was kind of off about the fact that the king suggested to send him to, well, Central Park. But I think I have an explanation for this. After all, he said, why not make an example of him? Because he knows of a place that's rock and steel and nothing grows. I think he was looking at New York City and he didn't see Central Park within it. And even still, you gotta admit, there's no denying that New York City is 99% rock and steel. I'm thinking that's what he was seeing, but, you know, he's an idiot, so what can I tell you there? And you know, funny thing, I don't really think he was really a bad guy at all. I really don't. Because he was so against Ganorga turning everyone into stone. Well, let's get real. He did talk her out of doing it, right? And plus, don't forget what he says when they come across the kids.
And look, that sweet, adorable little babe.
It's those scenes alone that make me say he probably wasn't really a bad guy. Ganorga, on the other hand, there's no doubt about her, but him, yeah, I think, truth be told, I think he was really a good troll. And there's no doubt, it is great animation, but I'm not going to lie, it does not do enough for most people, so there aren't too many people who like this movie, and I'm one of them. Well, what can I say?
In 1995, Don Bluth released The Pebble and the Penguin. But sadly, just like with Rock-A-Doodle, Thumbelina, and A Troll in Central Park, this one bombed at the box office and was received with bad reviews, which ultimately resulted in Don shutting down his official studio. And as for me, what do I think of this movie? Well, unpopular opinion, I like it. Yeah, it's kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. To start with the animation, kind of a mixed bag about the animation. I mean, the backgrounds are painted beautifully, and some of the designs of the penguins are pretty creative, but the teeth kind of throw me off. I mean, I have seen animated birds with teeth in them, but it's usually only spared for things like comedic effect. But with the fact that these teeth keep on popping in and out at every other frame is kind of jarring. And there are times where the background characters don't move properly, and sometimes they feel like they're made out of wax. But this is obviously results of budgeting issues. The cast was also really good. Our main character, Hubie, is voiced by Martin Short. Rocco is voiced by Jim Belushi. And our villain, Drake, is voiced by the one and only Tim Curry. And they give pretty good performances. Like, Jim Belushi just really cracks me up as Rocco. His performance kind of reminded me of Ray Romano's performance as Manny in the Ice Age movies. As for Drake, well, what better of a choice than to cast Tim Curry as your villain? I mean, seriously, Tim Curry can just read the phone book, and it would still sound deliciously evil. As for the songs were written by Barry Manilow, the same guy who wrote the songs in Thumbelina. And honestly, I have to say, this is a bit of a step up from Thumbelina's songs, because some of them were pretty catchy. Don't Make Me Laugh was a great villain song, but again, it's Tim Curry singing, so yeah, enough said. And I'll admit, Looks Like I Got Me a Friend was pretty bouncy and catchy, even if some of the jokes were pretty lame. And as for the script, I thought the story was well-paced, even though there were some major league plot holes that I think I won't name off for now, except for one later. And I really liked the interactions between Hubie and Rocco. But there were a few flaws with the script. Like, for example, there's this narrator who has to keep on chiming in every few minutes to explain to us what's going on. And my research tells me that the narrator was Shawnee Wallace, but it's really a thorn in my side in this case, because it's like you're sitting at a movie theater next to this one person who has to keep on chiming in every few minutes, and all you want to do is yell at them to shut up. And, well, I don't really find Hubie and Marina's relationship all that believable, because it's got the same problem that Thumbelina and Cornelius's relationship had. They don't get enough screen time together, so the romance is not as believable. And this one's only like a pet peeve, because a repeated line from Marina is, it's not the pebble, it's the penguin. But then she accepts the pebble, well, at the end, even though Hubie lost it. Now, when Hubie loses it after the orca incident, at first I thought it was going to be kind of like the magic feather from Dumbo, where it's what's inside that's more important. But having Hubie just give the pebble anyway kind of shoots the message in the foot a little bit. But that one's just more of a pet peeve. As for the rest, it's still kind of an enjoyable movie. On the whole, I'd give The Pebble and the Penguin a 7 out of 10 and a silver medal. It's definitely worth watching. at least in my opinion. What did you guys think?
Pebble and the Penguin. This is actually kind of an interesting one, but also, when looking behind the scenes of this movie, I feel super sorry for everybody. On the one hand, it does look like something that Don Bluth was interested in. Much like A Troll in Central Park, Don Bluth was intentionally catering to kids, but he had more ideas that he wanted to put forth in Pebble and the Penguin. But MGM got involved and insisted on some of the changes that went on in there, so you could see some of the unfinished animation, and even some of the story plots feel unfinished. And to make it even worse, Don Bluth and Gary Goldman disliked this movie so immensely that they demanded to not be credited as directors. Yikes! So yeah, this did not turn out as they had hoped at all. And it honestly does make me wonder, how would have they done it better? I mean, I'm seriously intrigued on what they would do better. I'll admit that I was at first reluctant to see this movie until Alpha Lion Simba said that it was his guilty pleasure, and you know my guilty pleasure in Thumbelina and movie fans' guilty pleasure in A Troll in Central Park, so I had to give this one a chance, and I don't think it's terrible at all. I don't think it's great, but I think there were some really good parts in there. Like, I love the opening with the songbook and almost looking like a Fantasia/Hercules opening credits sequence, and the songs are clearly competently sung and sometimes even decently written. At least it's better than Mary the Mole, obviously. And the animation, when it is finished, does actually look fun. And does look like there was at least a little enjoyment in some of it. And the voice talents in there are great, including Martin Short, who plays the main character. I never thought he could play a romantic figure in there, but he proved me wrong. I've mostly grown to see him in comedic roles. Nice to see him do something, and he's actually a pretty good singer too. And then, of course, there's the easily best performance from Tim Curry. It's like you could put him in any movie at all and he would automatically make it better. Anytime he's in a role, he just rocks it. And it makes me think back to Rock-A-Doodle with Christopher Plummer, and I kept thinking, how do these guys make these villains so much fun? And with Christopher Plummer, what he did was deliver an undeserved dignity to the character's dialogue. Whereas with Tim Curry, I get the feeling that he always looks at a script and goes, you know what, I'm all in! And come on, anytime I hear the song Don't Make Me Laugh, there's one thing I always think of.
Don't make me laugh. Or slap my knee.
How come nobody's ever made that comparison? But yeah, Tim Curry's pretty much the best thing about Pebble and the Penguin for purely his performance. There are great moments, but you could clearly see some of the moments that Don Bluth and Gary Goldman were very much having problems with, including that the voice actors had to come back and redo some of their lines. You could kind of see the problems going on in the story. Like, I would have liked to have seen more chemistry between Marina and Hubie. Like, what makes her fall in love with him, or him fall in love with her? And also, the animation is pretty inconsistent at times. There's a specific scene that I can think of off the top of my head where there are penguins in cages with bars that they could easily slip through if they tried. In one of their songs, they actually do get out. And the first thing I keep thinking is, why don't you just get out if you're concerned? Especially Hubie. He could easily slip through that cage if he tried. He doesn't even need to wait for the cage door to open. In fact, I think his cage is the most easy to escape from.
You can fit through those bars? Yeah. You are such an idiot. What?
Another inconsistency is that there's a moment where Rocco, who dreams of flying, is picking up the Hubie and Marina and not flapping his wings. That's not how flying works. That's floating. Well, in terms of a score, I'll have to say that it's definitely more enjoyable than I gave it credit for, so thank you, Alpha Lion Simba, for recommending it. And I do admire the fun going on in the voice acting department, or at least what I got out of it. So I have to give this movie a 3 out of 5.
Sadly, I don't really have too much of an opinion on the Pebble and the Penguin because, well, I've never really seen it. Unfortunately, when this came out, it did not come to my city. At least, I don't think it did because I never saw any commercials for it or anything. However, I did look up quite a few clips to get my head around it. And you know what? I gotta say, it's actually pretty decent for what it is. Basically, the animation. It is great. It is definitely great. There's some very good attention to detail here because the penguins, they look absolutely great. And I find it interesting how the female penguins, it looks like they're wearing a dress. Yeah, I'm serious. If you pay close attention to their feet, there's like a little frilly petticoat thing going on between their legs. So it looks like they're wearing a dress. And at times it looks like they're not for certain scenes. It's a very unique quality, one that I've never seen in any other film. And on top of that, Drake, he's a very interesting character because, he looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger penguin here. I'm not kidding. And he wears a cape and a sash belt. And it's not just the characters and the background, like Alpha said, it's also some of the other things, such as the orcas that are attacking Hubie and Rocco. There is some great attention to detail on those orcas. In fact, they even go so far as to add in the proper vocalizations that the whales actually give off. And I gotta give Don Bluth credit for that. Most people wouldn't have bothered. In fact, I haven't seen that kind of attention to detail since Star Trek IV. And as great as the animation is, it does have some problems. Now, I know Alpha already talked about the teeth thing because, well, it's back and forth. I can't help but be a stickler for the issue that penguins don't really have teeth. Let's just say that's where I stand on that. Penguins don't have teeth. I thought that was kind of silly. But at the same time, it does give an interesting picture, especially with Drake. Another thing I have an issue with is Rocco. Now, don't get me wrong, his design is cool, but I have to question, why does he have red eyes? Because traditionally, when an animated character has red eyes, that usually signifies that they're a villain. And Rocco is definitely no villain. I don't know, maybe he stays up 24/7, I don't know. And of course, with Drake, there is one thing that I really have an issue with, and that's the color of his head. The problem is the color on his head bounces between kind of a grayish color to a dark navy blue. It depends on how the lighting is. I don't get that. Why is his head not fully black like all the other penguins are? And from what I've seen, the cast is really good. Martin Short actually surprised me. And Jim Belushi, yeah, he's great, no doubt about it. And I know this has been said, but definitely the greatest one is definitely Tim Curry. Because let's get real, the man thrived on playing villains. He was the master of playing villains, especially in the 90s. And there is no denying that. Heck, the man said it himself that he absolutely loved playing villains. That's why he did it so much. And this was no exception. This was one of his best work. And I gotta say this, I love the song Don't Make Me Laugh. I know, it's been said, but I love it because, it's such a unique villain song. Because, well, the build-up is one of the things that catches my eye immediately. Because, she's telling him no to being his wife. And he is in such denial that, well, just watch.
No. No. Oh, I get it. You're joking.
I've seen a lot of egomaniacs, especially being the king of egomaniacs, Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. But I've never seen anyone who was such an egomaniac that he literally was lying to himself about the rejection. I mean, he put it down that she was joking. That's just priceless. I absolutely love that. And plus, the song, there's no doubt about it. Tim Curry, he's a great singer. This character sings a great song, even though he's making death threats to her, for crying out loud. And that's pretty much all I got for this film. Except, I will say this. I'm actually so impressed with the clips that I saw that I'm actually going to get that DVD right now. So, Alpha, Bonnie, I like it. I like what I'm seeing. I'm definitely going to watch the whole movie when I get it.
Due to the fact that Rock-A-Doodle, Thumbelina, A Troll in Central Park, and The Pebble and the Penguin all flopped at the box office, Don Bluth was forced to close his studio, and so instead, he tried his luck at Fox Animation Studios. His first film released from that studio was Anastasia. And guess what? It was a success! Yup. The film was a financial success and was received with positive reviews, and for pretty good reason. First up, the animation. I've said this before about Don's movies, and I'm gonna say it again. The animation is beautiful, particularly the character animation. They're given their own Disney-esque look without being super obvious that they're trying to copy off Disney. And the backgrounds are great. For me, the moment when the animation really shines through is during the song Paris Holds the Key to Your Heart. Because the backgrounds look like they came out of a painting, and that's when the character animation decides to get into its cartoony side. And it looks great. And it has a really good cast, too. Anastasia herself is voiced by Meg Ryan. Dimitri is voiced by John Cusack. His partner, Vlad, is voiced by Kelsey Grammer, aka Fraser from Cheers. The evil Rasputin is voiced by Christopher Lloyd, better known as Doc Brown from Back to the Future. And his sidekick, Bartok the Bat, is voiced by Hank Azaria, who is best known as Mo Sizlak, Chief Wiggum, and various other roles on The Simpsons. And the Dowager Empress is voiced by Miss Eglantine Price and Mrs. Potts herself, Angela Lansbury. All of them do great with who they're supposed to be. And I've always been a sucker for the scenes with Rasputin and Bartok because they just play each other off perfectly. And being that this was a movie that many people say was trying to copy off Disney, it's got some songs in it. And the music is phenomenal. Every single song was great to listen to. My personal favorite was In the Dark of the Night, hands down. For me, it's right up there with Be Prepared as one of the best villain songs in the history of animation. And it's amazing how Jim Cummings was able to imitate Christopher Lloyd's voice successfully. Then again, Jim Cummings is the second best voice actor in the world. But anyway, on with the script. I'm going to make no gripes about the historical inaccuracies of these movies because, well, one, it's historical fiction, so it's kind of expected like that. I mean, hating on this for the historical inaccuracies, it's kind of like hating on The Land Before Time just because it mixes in dinosaurs from the Jurassic period with those from the Cretaceous. But getting off that subject, the script is very well, because Anastasia, she's not looking for romance or anything. She's just looking for her family and her identity. And the pacing is good. The interactions with the characters are really good. There's just one thing that really bugs me about the script, and its usage of the third act misunderstanding. One of my most hated cliches out there. And yes, it plays out in the same way. But still, the script's good overall, and there are a lot of action scenes, many of which keep you on the edge of your seat, particularly the climax. So, overall, I give Anastasia an 8 out of 10 and a silver medal. So yeah, it's a good film. If you've got Disney Plus or Amazon Prime, or heck, even if you have access to DVDs, I say check it out.
And now we come to Anastasia. First thing I gotta say is, how have I not seen this movie before? So, yeah, this is a really good one. If you're going to knock off Disney, this is how to do it. I might as well start with the great things about this story. I love how it's not just a Disney knockoff, but it almost is Broadway-like, especially with their songs, choreography, and storyline. Heck, it's ironic that it's so good it's become a Broadway musical. Way to go, Don Bluth. The animation is smooth and beautiful, and while it doesn't seem like a Don Bluth movie, it really feels like that he was forced to knock off Disney just just to earn cash, but decided to actually develop his characters, which is a lot more than what Thumbelina did. And that's where I actually have to compare this movie to Thumbelina. What this movie did right that Thumbelina did not. The first thing is, the heroine actually has a personality and a set goal. Her goal is finding her family and who she is, because she doesn't remember. Thumbelina's goal? Get married. Also, there is a consistent storyline and actual funny side characters, and also you feel the grief of the Empress as she has lost her family. You don't get to spend time with Thumbelina's mother that much. Also, the romance feels a little more real in this one. Like, you feel when the characters are one-lining off each other or genuinely in love. Whereas in Thumbelina, it's just they meet and they're in love. But one thing that I admire greatly about this film that is so cool is that it brings to life a dream that most people had about the Romanovs, that at least one member survived. It didn't try to say anything like, oh yes, we're historical, like the Magic Voyage kind of did. It basically just played off a dream that people had about Anastasia surviving, which I'll get into later. Though, on a side note, I have to point out that it is so cool that the ball gown she wears looks exactly like one of the dresses she wore as a kid, for real. There's not too many downsides that I can think of for this movie, though I do think that Rasputin is kind of an unnecessary villain. I get where they're going with this character, and I think he's got a really cool villain song, and he's got a really good character arc, and you could argue that during that time, people vilified the real Rasputin, so I don't mind that they made him a real villain here necessarily. But I still think that he was kind of unnecessary. He's barely involved with Anastasia. But then again, when he tries to deal with Anastasia, I really think he should have done it directly himself. The other downside is that, of course, it's not historically accurate. And yeah. Everybody has said that basically. And it's even included in the Watch Mojo Top 10 Most Inaccurate Movies. So I might as well give a brief history lesson on this and describe what the Romanovs' fates were. If you don't want to hear about it, then skip it. A movie fan put a link down below in where to skip it. Basically, the entire Romanov family was being held prisoner, and they were taken down to a basement and all shot to death. All of them. And many people for a long time did not know what happened to them and wanted to believe that at least one of them survived. There were many attempts of people saying that they were the last of the Romanovs, including a woman named Anna Anderson who claimed to be the lost princess Anastasia. And for a while it seemed to work. However, Anna's DNA eventually showed that she was not the Grand Duchess. And the search continued until 2007 when a Russian archaeologist discovered two burned partial skeletons. The DNA confirmed that they were indeed the remains of Anastasia and her little brother. And I will also add that Rasputin was assassinated long before the Romanovs were killed, so he had nothing to do with their demise. If anything, the first part of the movie did get it right that he was among the council. In fact, he was actually described as a holy man and counsel to the queen. But because he had so much power, especially close contact with the Romanovs, he was assassinated. Personally, I don't consider this movie entirely disrespectful because this movie came out 10 years before Anastasia's remains were confirmed. So, in some ways, it fairy taleized a lost dream that we would have liked to have seen. We would have loved to have really seen Anastasia be reunited with her grandmother and her family avenged. I guess you could say the only happy ending the real Anastasia got was that she and her family were always together. Moment of silence for her. Personally, I think this movie's really good, and while Thumbelina will always be my guilty pleasure, this movie is even better. And so I have to give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. Plus the scene where the grandmother and Anastasia reunite always makes me cry, especially every time I think of my family and every moment that I wish I could be with them.
Anastasia. This movie was all the rage back then. I remember there being thousands of commercials talking about it. But funny thing, it didn't interest me, so I didn't bother with it. And even now, everybody, especially Jonathan, Bonnie, and Alpha, are telling me that I really need to look this one up. And since I haven't really seen it, I can't say much. But I have looked up a few clips, so I got a fair idea on how it is. Like everybody else said, the animation is great, there's no doubt about that. And the characters, they're good too. If there was any complaint I would have to make, it would definitely be the historical accuracy. And no, I'm not talking about Anastasia being alive when she really wasn't. That is completely different. Because, well, like Bonnie said, they didn't know for sure at that time. What I'm talking more about is Rasputin. Now, granted, they did have some accuracy that he was labeled as a holy man, and that he was Tsar Nicholas's top advisor. However, he was not thrown out of the Tsar's palace for being a fraud. Now, a lot of people did and still do believe that he really was a fraud, but he was not thrown out by the Tsar. And of course, Rasputin did not put a curse on the family. Although, there is a little inch of truth to that. It pretty much comes down to a letter that Rasputin had written to somebody. It goes just like this. If I am murdered by nobles, and if they shed my blood, their hands will remain soiled with my blood. For 25 years they will not wash their hands of my blood. They will leave Russia. Brothers will kill brothers, and they will kill each other and hate each other. And for 25 years, there will be no nobles in the country. Some people have took it to interpret that he pretty much foresaw that that would be the end of the Tsar if anything ever happened to him. Which, ironically, did, because it all kind of started with Rasputin's murder, or assassination, wherever you want to call it. And that's the other thing about the historical inaccuracy. In the movie, Rasputin is drowned in the icy water, but truth be told, there was a lot more to it than that. But for the obvious reasons, they couldn't really show that in a movie. In case you're curious as to how he really died, this is how it happened. To put it simply, he was assassinated by Prince Yusupov. Forgive me if I mispronounce the name, but I don't do well with Russian. He invited Rasputin to his home for tea and cakes. Of course, everything that Rasputin ate and drank was poisoned, but much to the prince's surprise, he didn't die, because apparently he didn't put enough poison in there. Rasputin was a very tall man, so he eventually grew impatient and shot him. But just when they were getting ready to dump the body, Rasputin sprang back to life and ran. He was chased down, beaten, and shot twice. Some versions even claim that he was stabbed while they were doing it. Anyway, after they shot him, they threw his body into the river. It was found days later, and even more shocking, they found that water was in his lungs, which says that he was alive, and the final straw was that he drowned in the icy water. For the obvious reasons, Don Bluth and Fox wouldn't go that far, because wow, can you imagine that in a kid's movie? So, that's forgivable. And speaking of which, I do agree. Rasputin was an unnecessary villain, mainly because they put it down that he was the reason that the Tsar and his family were killed. When, no, that didn't really happen at all. It wasn't really him. In real life, yeah, politically he kind of did, but not with a curse or anything like that. At the same time, I still can't understand why they had to have him falling apart like a zombie who's been around too long, because his lips are on his beard instead of where they're supposed to be, his eyeballs popping out, his hand is coming off, Why was that so necessary? I don't get it. But from what I've seen with some of the songs, and certainly some of the clips that I was able to look up, and when I get the chance, I will watch this. And sadly, that's really all I can say about this.
Since Anastasia was a big hit at the box office, Don Bluth was able to release another movie, Titan A.E. Did this one have the same success as Anastasia? No. Titan A.E. bombed at the box office and was received with mixed reviews, and as a result, was Don Bluth's final movie. And I'll be honest, before we started this review, I had never seen Titan A.E., so I rented it on YouTube. What did I think of it? I've got mixed thoughts about Titan A.E. I don't hate it. It's just not quite up to the same length as something like, say, The Secret of Nim or The Land Before Time. So I'm going to go on a bit of a different style of reviewing than we have with the previous movies. I'm going to get the bad stuff out of the way first, starting with the first half of the movie. Well, I think I'm going to let Petrie sum up the first half of the movie.
It's boring, boring, very, very
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up perfectly. The pacing was just terrible in the first half. They drag on a lot of scenes to the point where I felt like I was almost going to fall asleep, because the first half spends too much on the action scenes and not enough on character development. Speaking of lack of character development, there's a part where our main character's father is killed, and it's rushed and happens too early in the movie. I mean, granted, in The Land Before Time, they killed off Littlefoot's mother pretty early, but it worked because she and Littlefoot still had enough screen time together for us to see their relationship, which in turn made her death all the more effective in terms of drama. But the way they killed off the main character's father so early in the movie, it felt like somebody pressed the fast forward button. Also, this movie gets pretty violent. Like, there's a part where a bug alien gets skewered into goo and one character gets his neck snapped. I can tell Don was trying to be violent, kind of like with The Secret of Nim, but he could have toned it down a little bit. And our main character, Kale, he's just plain not interesting. I mean, I like Matt Damon's performance as the character, but this character I've seen done to death so many times in other better movies. And one of the villains is voiced by Nathan Lane, and as much as I like Nathan Lane as an actor, I have to say he was not suited for the part here, mainly because he speaks in this slow, monotone voice. I mean, Nathan Lane's proven he can do serious roles very well, but his performance here just sticks out like a sore thumb, and I don't know. I think maybe Tim Curry would have been better suited for the part. But that's all the bad stuff out of the way, so what did I like about Titan AE? Well, again, as is the case with Don Bluth, the animation was very good. The backgrounds really help you believe the sci-fi setting of the movie. As for the character animations, some are given their own unique design, while others have a very distinctive Don Bluth look. And they use CGI in a lot of parts, especially with the villains. And while I didn't like Kale as a character, I did find Amiko, his love interest, very interesting, and I did like her voice actress's performance. And I think it was about halfway through the movie that the plot finally started to pick up after the boring first half, and the action scenes in this second half really keep you on the edge of your seat, particularly the climax. So, overall, I'd give Titan AE a 6 out of 10 and a bronze medal. Is it something I'd watch over and over and over again? Probably not, but I'm glad I saw it. In fact, I may see it a few more times. But yeah, I'd say if you're in the mood for a sci-fi adventure, this might be one for you.
Ah yes, Titan AE, the last film that Don Bluth ever made. And it was also the first one where he literally mixed CGI with traditional 2D animation. And he did a pretty good job with it. Now, there's not much I could say that hasn't already been said, except for a few key things. Like, I do love the animation as much as everybody else because, you know, it's a great blend that's going on with the CG and the 2D. And for this film, you could tell that Don Bluth has gone back to his old roots from The Secret of Nim. So yeah, he's definitely gone back to the violence. And it does work for this movie because, truth be told, I don't think this was truly meant for kids. I think this was meant for everybody because it's giving a dismal fact that Earth is destroyed by these aliens and we're struggling to survive because, you know, we're outcasts, we're homeless, we're literally nobodies, while all these other aliens walk all over us and tell us what to do and all that. So finding the Titan and establishing a new Earth is very important for the human race to survive. So obviously, we're getting back to that darker approach. And again, I really think it was meant for everybody. But sadly, it did not do very well in the box office. There was a lot of people who liked it, but there was a lot of people who either didn't bother with it or hated it. In fact, a lot of people are looking at this now and classifying it as an underrated classic. I think that's giving a little too much credit, to be honest, because compared to Secret of Nim, really? It may be an underrated movie, but a classic? No. But it is a good movie. It does have quite a few good points, like I said about the animation and so on. But one of the big things that just about everybody can agree on was the soundtrack. The music is awesome. It's gripping. It blends with what's going on during every situation. It's perfect. In fact, this movie actually won a Golden Reel Award for sound editing. That's how good it really was. And since everything's really been covered about it, there's not much I could say about it. Except that if you haven't seen it, you might want to check it out. It's actually pretty darn good. I wouldn't call it a classic, but I would still call it a movie worth seeing.
Titan AE. Much like you, Alpha Lion Simba, I did not hear of this movie until when we were doing this review. And I can't say that it's a bad thing necessarily or a good thing, because this movie is kind of all over the place in good ways and not that great of ways either. I really like the premise. It's about humans leaving the Earth before it's absolutely destroyed, and how a group of scientists prepared for it so that they could meet up on another planet and start life all over again. I like this idea. And I also like that it did not try to rip off Star Wars like most space movies would during that time. Also, the animation's really good. It combined with CGI mostly well, and it kind of has a Treasure Planet feel to it in a way. Also, I like the character Corso. He's pretty cool. He almost seems like a Han Solo kind of character. I also saw that this movie inspired novels by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Mosta. Sorry if I mispronounced the name. And comic series. So this movie really has great potential and has a lot of fun and feel to it. And the best part is the comic series actually focuses on Kale's character, which brings us to the downsides. I don't think that Kale is really that interesting. I'm sure he's interesting in the comics, but in the movies, he's pretty much every character that most of us have seen so far, and he's just not as interesting as I wish he could have been. And he's pretty cliched, as are most of the characters. Most of them are pretty dull, cliched. And yeah, Alpha, that also brings up the other thing that I agree with. The first 30 minutes are pretty boring. But thankfully it does get exciting later. Also, the aliens, like, how are they able to conquer Earth and yet not go at light speed or even shoot straight? Do they have the same logics as the stormtroopers? Because seriously, these aliens constantly have the heroes in sight and they always miss. They miss their targets. But other than that, for the most part, it's mostly good. I don't think it's their best, but I don't think it's their worst either. And I really felt like this was something Don Bluth wanted to do. Whereas with Pebble and the Penguin, maybe not as much, but here, it really felt like he wanted to try something, but also didn't entirely have control over his project either. So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 for its efforts. And you know what? I may have to check out the comic series and the novels.
Now before we go, here's a neat bit of trivia for you guys. Don Bluth was originally going to be involved with Ice Age, but he quit the project when it was decided that the movie was going to be in CG.
Ice Age, directed by Don Bluth. I almost like the sound of that. I like the first couple of Ice Age movies the way they are, but at the same time, I would have loved to have seen how Don Bluth would have tackled the first Ice Age movie, and if he probably could have saved the sequels.
And I hear rumors that he's going to go back into filmmaking, making an animated movie based off his Dragon Lairs games.
I hope that's true, because I would love to see the Dragon's Lairs games turned into an actual movie.
And that was our little tidbit about the movies by Don Bluth.
Yeah, it sure is, and I'm glad to have been a part of this, because I've watched quite a few of his movies over the years, but I never thought of once talking about the man himself, so I'm glad I was a part of this.
Yeah, guys, this was so much fun, and one of the things I loved about this review was that I felt like I got to know Don Bluth a little more, not just by reading up on him, but also looking at his work and some of his best material, and just how much of a risk taker he was during a time when Disney was declining, and even when Disney was rising again, he took risks in ways that worked and other times did not work, but at least he tried. If a person can try, whether they succeed or fail, then at least they will have that on their conscience, saying that at least they did something, tried for it, and whether it turns out for the better or worse, at least you could tell yourself that you worked for it. Even something like A Troll in Central Park, which, like I said, had some of his most beautiful animation involved. He tried with that one at least, even if it massively failed. And yes, he could have tried harder, but for the most part, you could see where some of his effort was. I seriously would love to see a Dragon's Lair movie from Don Bluth. We do kind of have a TV series, but I don't think it's directed by Don Bluth or has much to do with his game, and it was more cheap than anything else. So, yeah, I would love to see Don Bluth come back with another movie and make it based on one of his games. I bet you he'd have a ton of fun with it.
Thanks for watching. Feel free to check out all of our channels, and I hope to do more team-ups in the future.
And as always, I hope to do a lot more collaboration videos with you guys.
This was a lot of fun, guys, and I'm glad that we could do this. And I hope we could do more collaborations again soon. Until then, this is Bonnie from Joy Unicycle saying see you later.
This is Movie Fan, signing off.
Alpha Lion Simba,